Welcome to the first Balanced Living lecture of 2019. The lectures are put on by the Cincinnati Bar Association's Health and Wellbeing Committee. I'm the chair, Tabitha Hochscheid. I just have a few reminders and announcements before we begin. The Balanced Living lectures are done 3 to 4 times a year. This year we're doing 3 lectures. Our next lecture will be on September 6th with Dr. Julia King, and her topic will be Practicing Happiness. And there will be a lecture in the fall, although we don't have a firm date, with Dr. Sean Cotton of UC Health on mindfulness. She is the director of UC Health's Integrative Health Department, and she has set up mindfulness classes at UC Law School. Today's topic is nutrition. It's the most popular topic that we get requests for. And today we're lucky to have 2 people from Mercy Health, and they are Candace Crowley and Emma Majchrzak, who are both registered dietitians with Mercy Health who help people counsel them on making healthy choices, and they're going to talk to us about healthy choices and how to stay on track even in stressful times.
Thank you. So before we start, I just wanted to say thank you guys for coming out and taking the time out of your busy schedule to eat lunch with us, and hopefully you guys enjoy. Again, what we're going to talk about today is just overall healthy living, especially during that busy work week and trying to make that healthy balance. So that's why we kind of named it that Balanced Living title. Some of the contents that we are going to go over, again, why nutrition is important, having that work-life balance, and then also having that healthy living lifestyle. Okay, so why we want to eat healthy and why nutrition is important, because when we choose those poor foods or have poor food choices throughout the work week or day-to-day basis, they do give us some impacts in our daily living. This is not a full list, but some things that can cause an impact of our poor food choices could be we're at greater risk for developing diabetes and cardiovascular disease. We can develop some poor sleep habits, eating habits when we eat late with eating dinner and then going straight to bed can lead to indigestion, impaired ability to exercise. So a lot of the time we're sitting at our desk most of the day and not really realizing what we are consuming. It can kind of make sure that we're getting that appropriate activity level throughout the day, and then obviously some mood changes. Quickly, I just want to kind of talk about diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Obesity can be related to diabetes. Some of the contributing factors would be like where the fat accumulates within your body. Genetics plays a really big role, and again, that lack of activity, and even some diet choices. So we want to make sure you're doing everything you can correctly, diet and exercise-wise. Obviously, you don't have much to change about your genetics, but being able to say that you're doing everything correctly in order to prevent these diseases. And this is just from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention. This is from 2017, just a couple of fast facts. It's really interesting because there's about 30 million people of all ages in the U.S. that have diabetes. So that's roughly about 9.5% of our population. And it's ever growing. So we see maps from back in the year 1994 to now. The whole color coding has changed, and it's very, very in depth with how many people have diabetes. Out of the 30 million, 23 million people are physically diagnosed. So they go get their annual labs, they have those doctor's appointments, and they know what their blood sugars are running, and those people are diagnosed. I think it's pretty interesting because 7 million out of the 30 don't know that they're diagnosed. So that's about 24% of people with diabetes aren't diagnosed. So that's simply just because we haven't gotten the lab work done. That's why we really recommend having those annual physicals just to see where you are falling within that spectrum there. And then about 84 million people in the US are pre-diabetic. So that just means that our blood sugars are a little bit elevated, but not elevated enough for us to be considered that high blood sugar, have diabetes. So it's a little bit higher than that normal kind of lab value. So about 84% of those, or 84 million people have prediabetes. And then going into the impacts of cardiovascular disease. This is from a recent journal of the American Medicine Association of Cardiology, and it was found that men who are overweight, about 21% have a higher risk factor of developing these cardiovascular diseases compared to the normal weight man. And then 67% higher in those obese men compared to the normal weight. And then same with women. Risk factors increase by 32% in overweight women, and then 85% higher risk factors in that obese woman. And how they did this, this is just your body mass index. It's a simple calculation, also known as BMI, of your height and weight. Doesn't take into factor your gender, your age, your muscle mass, things of that nature. So it really doesn't kind of put that into perspective, but simply just height and weight. It gives you that outline right there of where you fall in that BMI category. And anything that's 25 or less is in that normal range. Anything that's 30 or greater would be considered obese. So now going into that work-life balance. So we're going to talk quickly about those diets and trends out there, making sure we're getting those nutrient-dense choices, eating out, and then we'll touch on meal planning as well. So I think, okay, here we go. These are all of the diets that are out there. This is just a little list right now, but as you can see, there's a whole bunch of diets out there. Typically restricting some kind of nutrient. So what we're here to say is not necessarily putting you on a diet, but just teaching you those healthier ways in order to really have what you want, of course in moderation, but also being aware that all of these diets don't necessarily have that study out there that it is a long-term success. Short-term, yes, but when we say, okay, are these lifestyle changes? For the short term, it can be. And then some people, again, yes, it can be successful for those. But just being aware of what you are doing and how you're doing these. So there's a whole bunch of resources out there on different websites and things like that. So we just want to be here to tell you, just make sure that you know where the source is coming from. And if you do decide to do any of these diets, just make sure you're being followed by a professional who is very well informed and educated on these specific diets. So we're going to just kind of talk about healthier ways, not necessarily putting people on a diet. Okay, so this is kind of talking about the processed foods. So when you go into the grocery store, all of those processed foods are inside those aisles. So we really want to kind of benefit you from walking around the aisles of the grocery store, so the perimeter of the grocery store, where we can get those whole foods. Again, we can get those foods inside those aisles on for certain items, but being aware of what they do contain. So reading that nutrition label, sometimes it's too much work at that time when you're grocery shopping, but just being more aware of what you are consuming and what kind of things to look out for when you're reading a label. So the first thing that people look at on a label is what usually? Calories, right? So what we say, honestly, I don't really even look at that calorie mark that much. It's about those other nutrients that really take into play. So I think the first thing that you should look at is that serving size, because what is listed underneath, so all of those nutrients listed underneath, that's what's going to be in that one serving size. So for example, this product says 1.5 cups. So let's say it's chips, for example. We come home from work and sit on the couch and oops, we didn't portion it out, we're eating that whole bag of chips. What we would have to do then is look at the servings per container and multiply everything underneath by 4, for example, in this. So that really increases all of those nutrients that we don't necessarily need or want. So serving size, super important. That would be the first thing that I would look at. Sodium. So sodium is very, very elevated in our processed foods. They typically put it in there for that preservative to increase that shelf life. So a lot of the time our products in our pantry really last a long time because of those preservatives. So that's why we really want to watch that sodium out, or just be aware. So this sodium, for example, says 430 milligrams. So we don't know if that's high or low. Scroll to the right side of the percent daily value. This gives us a good idea if your nutrient is high or low in that product. So, for example, sodium. This says 430 milligrams with 19%. Anything that's 5% or less is low in that nutrient. Anything that's 20% or more would be high in that nutrient. I know that's a big gap, but quickly when you're at the store, you can kind of just look at that and you would know if it's fairly high or fairly low. So again, for this sodium option, 19% fairly high, right? Because it's closer to 20. So we want to make sure that our fat, cholesterol, sodium are in those 5% ranges. And then just making sure that we're watching that sodium intake, which we'll talk about too, eating out and things like that. Carbohydrates. So what I just wanted to touch on for carbohydrates, you can see those little subcategories, our dietary fiber and our total sugars. Those are already included in our total carbs. So we still want to make sure that we're getting a great source of fiber. So we really want to incorporate that higher fiber content. I would say anything 3 to 5 plus grams of fiber would be a really excellent source. And then of course sugars, we want to get as low as we can. Typically, we say about 25 grams of sugar or less a day. So if you're drinking a Coke can, I'm sorry to tell you, you're already past your daily intake for your sugars. So really, really, really focusing and just being more mindful of that sugar content. And then lastly, that ingredient list. So we are eating a product. We want to know how much or what we are consuming, every single ingredient. So I always say the less ingredients, the better. So making sure that you're looking at those, I would say the first 3 ingredients are the ingredients with that, that's the majority of what's in that product. So if you see a sugar in there that's in the first 3 ingredients, okay, maybe it's a little bit too much sugar. So those are just some things that you can look out for when you're reading that label. So this is kind of cool. So if you guys have ever seen the food pyramid a while back, this is just an updated version of it, and it's called MyPlate. So MyPlate is super nice because it kind of gets you in that mindset of, okay, we're eating out, we're even eating at home. Portions are a lot bigger these days. So it really takes into consideration of, okay, I'm eating out, let's try to portion out our meal so we can still enjoy the foods that we want, but obviously be in that kind of hopefully a little bit lower in that serving size that you're given. So this is how we usually tell people to portion out your plate. So half of that plate, we want to make sure we're incorporating those veggies. So I know sometimes it's a little bit harder. I always say try to aim for at least 2 servings a day, if not more, of course, but maybe at that lunchtime we're getting those veggies in and at that dinner time. So when we're doing that, half of our plate should be those veggies. A fourth of our plate is going to be that starch, other words, carbohydrate, grains. That would be the fourth of our plate. And then the last fourth should be our protein. So just getting in a variety of those veggies. We want to make sure we're incorporating that starch. And when we talk about starch, we want to make sure it's whole grain, brown rice, sweet potato, 100% whole grain pasta, wheat bread. Those higher fiber foods help lower cholesterol and help control your blood sugars a little bit better. So really trying to incorporate those as much as you can. And then the last fourth, protein. We want to make sure it's lean, baked, grilled. Try to limit that fried foods. So just try to incorporate those leaner cuts. When we do add the fried breading around our protein, it's just going to add a lot of sodium, fat, cholesterol, things like that. I'm very realistic, so every once in a while it's okay. But trying your best to choose those healthier options when you can.
Question.
Yes?
Would it be better to decrease the proportions of the protein and the starch even lower than a
I don't think that's necessary. I mean, everybody's different with how many calories they need and how many nutrients they need a day. This is just like a general guideline of how to portion it out. For example, if you wanted for a meal like a salad with chicken on top and you didn't have that rice section, that would be okay. But I would suggest trying to incorporate that protein in at least at every meal, whether it's plant-based or animal-based. Yeah. kind of like what I just said about those whole, yeah, sorry. Good question. Yes, I meant to, yes. So dinner plates are really big these days, right? So I would say it's about a 9-inch plate, which is about the standard size of like a paper plate, right? Again, paper plates now are bigger sizes, but that standard paper plate, about the 9-inch plate, is what we go by. Yeah, good question. Okay, so whole foods, just touch base on this. So kind of incorporating the whole grains, things like that. This slide just kind of talks to you about how we can kind of make sure we're incorporating our homemade foods as much as we can. For example, today we're going to talk about a quick, easy recipe for a trail mix compared to a store-bought trail mix. A lot less in calories, fat, sodium, things of that nature. So that's what that slide talks about. Okay, we're getting to the good part, and you guys might not like me after the next slide, but this is talking about eating out. So I love talking about eating out because, you know, it's very convenient these days. It's definitely increased from the past, and typically we eat out more than 3 times a week at least, especially for that lunchtime and then dinner too. So we want to make sure that we're choosing those healthier options when we can. So a couple of things that I like to say, if you're at a sit-down restaurant, I always say try to aim for that lean protein source and then 2 servings of that vegetable. So typically it comes with 2 sides, right? So try to pick those veggies. So whether it's a side salad and then those grilled asparagus, whatever it may be. Making sure, you can kind of see these points up there listed, but making sure we're considering our drinks. So I already said a little Coke can is more than 25 grams of sugar that we need a day. So trying not to consume your calories with the beverages. So whether that's alcoholic beverages, the sodas, the juices, things like that. We really would incorporate more water. What we say for water, about 64 ounces a day. So that's 4 regular water bottles, trying to get that in and really reduce the amount of sugary beverages that we do consume. Some things you could do at the before you go eat out. If you know the restaurant that you're going to eat out prior to, always look up the menu online if you have time. So you can look up their nutrition PDF file. It will all come up with all the nutrient values, and you can kind of see what you normally get, see whatever specific nutrient you're looking for, and try to compare and contrast other menu options there. You can always split it in half, take half to go, share it with somebody. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can do. Again, just trying to make the healthiest you can when you are eating out in those situations. So now we'll have a little fun. So we're going to guess the amount of sodium and fat in these 2 meals. So I just picked 2 random ones. Before we guess and before I ask you, the sodium amount per day for a typical person is about 2,300 milligrams of sodium. And actually, the American Heart Association is saying lower than that if you have heart failure or high blood pressure. They want you to aim around 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of sodium a day. So with that, keep that in mind. And then fat is going to vary depending on how many calories your body needs, right? So everybody's different. I would say a good kind of range would be that 45 to 75 gram range. Again, give or take on how many calories your body personally needs. So the first one, we're going to go to Chick-fil-A and we're going to have a deluxe sandwich with a large fry. So take a wild guess, just for the sandwich, how much sodium do you think is in there? Wild guess. Yes. 700. Any other guesses?
Higher. With the cheese in it.
It's higher, yes. Cheese is high in sodium, yes. All right. So, I didn't have you guess for fat, but this one has about 1,600 milligrams of sodium and then 23 grams of fat. So that's about half your serving of fat a day and mostly basically your whole sodium intake for the day. But that doesn't include the fries. So we're going to talk about the fries. How much sodium? 100,000. So this one has 370 milligrams of sodium and 24 grams of fat, giving the total about 2,000 milligrams of sodium and 47 grams of fat. So just that mindless eating, we're not necessarily going to look at the menu right before we go through the drive-thru, but choosing those healthier options. So now we're going to go to the Cheesecake Factory. We're still hungry. So we're going to have a salad. It's healthy, right? So we're going to have chicken, mango, avocado salad, and of course that cheesecake at the end. So wild guess, how much sodium? Just in the salad. It will have everything on it, yeah. Yep, the dressing is going to add a little bit. Same thing, 1,600. This one's 2,000 milligrams of sodium. So even though you're having a salad, it may not be the healthiest because of what's on there. So the croutons, the dressings, the cheeses, things like that. So again, still being aware, about 103 grams of fat. So that's already past your intake for the day. But now we're still having a cheesecake. This is the original cheesecake. Wild guess. Yeah, that was good. About 510 milligrams of sodium and about 59 grams of fat.
He should get a prize.
Sorry, we don't have anything for you.
You can be first up for trail mix.
You can get a cheesecake. This is about 2,600 milligrams of sodium, about 162 grams of fat. So even though you think you may be eating healthy, you just really want to be more mindful and more cautious.
So just for a sec, what are the ingredients in that salad that are the biggest culprit?
For the sodium, probably the cheese.
You don't know how the chicken's prepared, if it's marinated in a sauce or some kind of seasoning with high sodium content.
The dressing.
Yeah.
And their portion sizes are really big at the Cheesecake Factory for the salad.
Yeah.
So I always say try to do the lunch portion when you can. Even then it's maybe a little bit elevated, but a lot less than that.
Yeah. Or if you split it, think if you cut it down the middle, you're getting
Right.
half the milligrams of sodium. So think about it that way too, to make it a little bit more realistic. Well, that's not the biggest culprit. I think the biggest culprit would be the dressing and the chicken marinade, because there's probably not 2 cups of cheese on there or anything. So I would think of it more so the marinade and the dressing, but everything will add up. So.
And you can always ask for the dressing on the side and dipping it in. They always give you a little less anyway than what they put it fully. So
I did actually read an article though that dipping sometimes, like in a sauce, maybe not necessarily salad dressing, you will eat more because you're not like putting it on yourself. Every bite you add more and more. So think about how much you're dipping too.
Exactly. All right. So I'm going to pass it off to Emma, and she's going to continue and talk about meal planning.
Yes. And so since we are afraid to eat out now, I'll talk you through eating at home a little bit and just, touching on it. It can be realistic to eat out. We talked about splitting things. Obviously, that adds up more so if we're eating out every single day or things of that nature. So don't hesitate to still enjoy eating out as a social gathering and things like that. It's just kind of being more realistic and aware of what we're consuming. But if we choose to eat in, and hopefully that will be the case to cut back on a lot of those fat, sodium, things in a meal from a restaurant that we're trying to cut back on, it's important to prepare whole foods from your home to control all of that. And it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be, 30 to 45 minute plus cooking endeavor. It can be simple, and it can have, 5 or less ingredients to make it a whole food still and something worth consuming that's fulfilling. So, keeping it simple. I think starting with the ingredients is the biggest thing. So when you're grocery shopping, when you're about to go to the grocery store, plan ahead. That's the biggest, meal planning, plan ahead. To help yourself stick to what you need. So not only saving money, but also making sure you're choosing the right items, and then that way you have something to actually make and put together. So you can refer back to that plate when you're thinking of meal planning to make it simple. Half vegetables, the other half split between grains and, chicken. So planning ahead, making your list, going through those things, when you're thinking about what you're eating. And then, always making sure that you're using things in your pantry too. That way you're not continuing to buy things. So there's apps now, and, everyone knows about Pinterest and things like that to make it easy to think about, what can I use at home to make a quick, easy meal that's healthful. And then, always having kitchen essentials. So we'll go through those kitchen essentials too, things that are recommended to have on hand. If you're in a pinch, haven't been to the grocery in weeks, things like that. that can be shelf stable. That way, you know, you have things on hand to choose versus stopping at, you know, the fast food restaurant drive-through, or picking up the chips and having that be a meal. So making it easy and having those things on hand. And then also when you're planning, you know, a meal for a week, a few weeks, things like that, thinking double duty. So what can I do with a plain chicken breast? You know, maybe I buy 6 or 4 in a package, but you know, that's one meal. So thinking in terms of double duty, how can I make it work for more than one meal, but not get, you know, overwhelmed and sick of eating the same thing every night. So in that sense, it's more so thinking long term. When you have your meals planned out, or when you're thinking about what you want to eat for the week and you have those grocery items on hand, how can I make this last longer? So, you know, just putting salt and pepper on like a chicken breast or a piece of lean fish, something of that nature, and then adding it to a dish to kind of play it up in a different way. So what I mean by that is I bake my chicken, I put it in the fridge. Tomorrow night I'm gonna make, you know, a stir fry. So I'm gonna put some low sodium soy sauce with some mixed vegetables. Maybe they're frozen, maybe they're fresh. That meal maybe takes 10 minutes since you already have it prepped. The next night I want a taco salad. So I'm gonna take out my vegetables. I'm gonna, you know, do maybe some peppers, lettuce, and then throw the, you know, the rest of that chicken breast, maybe do like an enchilada sauce on it that's low sodium, or a low sodium taco seasoning. Add that to it, and you have a taco salad that took maybe 10 minutes to make. So planning ahead, thinking about these meals, and having those things on hand to kind of play with to make it easier for yourself. So you're not spending a lot of time, but once again, always thinking ahead is going to be important. So that kind of goes along with lazy leftovers. And then freezing things. So maybe you make a healthy lasagna, or maybe you make, you know, your own marinara sauce to cut down on the sodium. You can put these things in Tupperware in the freezer, take them out, you know, in the morning. But that, again, takes planning ahead. But, you know, you take it out in the morning and you have it. So say you have a day off work, or it's a Saturday, you don't have plans. That's when you need to be thinking ahead about meals, so that way you save yourself time. So thinking all those things, I know that was like a lot in one slide, but it really is, bottom line, planning ahead and thinking about, you know, your reasoning behind buying these things. So definitely always having a plan when you go to the store, and that doesn't mean always having, you know, everything to a T, like this is what I'm gonna have for breakfast, lunch, dinner, every single time, but thinking ahead, oh, I'm gonna be busy on Wednesday, so what can I buy or what can I prep tonight, you know, to last me a few days or to have on hand. So keeping those things in mind. And so the other part of meal planning and eating out and being mindful and conscientious of, you know, good food decisions is also our physical well-being. So thinking about physical activity, our sleep habits. I know, you know, Tabitha mentioned mindfulness in the future. That can be you know, carried into nutrition and our health and well-being in the sense of dieting or lifestyle changes as well. So from the World Health Organization, these numbers haven't changed in quite some time. At least 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity aerobic physical activity for people ages 18 to 64. And that's a wide range of people. You know, and if you break it down, that's 30 minutes 3 times a week. So that's all you have to be doing, you know, or it can be broken down even simpler, you know, 10 minutes here and there. So kind of thinking about it and not so overwhelming of a number of 150 minutes, but kind of get that number down.
What happens after age 64?
You could slow down a little bit. You know, still getting in that physical activity. I think, you know, at some ages, it's obviously, in even some conditions, you have to have, you know, go through a doctor or maybe a physical therapist to understand your limitations and what they recommend for you. So I think beyond a certain age, it's more so individualized as far as what you're capable of and what your care provider or whoever maybe you're working with a physical trainer or someone of that nature, what they believe your limits should be. So still moving, still trying to be active, but they're not putting a limit on it. or a minimum amount, because obviously not everyone can do 150 minutes at specific ages. So being realistic with that number as well. So I didn't put 65 and over, 65 and over, but I think that, definitely talking with a healthcare provider to understand your limits at that age, because not everyone can be as active. And then it says it at the front too, it's not a one size fits all. So maybe you're 25 and you have limitations. Maybe you have, some heart condition or other kind of physical activity barriers. So at that point, I wouldn't assume a physician would never say don't be active again, but more so, here are your limits, this is what we'd recommend you be doing with supervision, something of that nature. So just kind of keeping all that in mind. And then, so breaking that down even further, I know I mentioned some, it doesn't have to be as overwhelming as 150 minutes a week. You don't have to try to get that in all in one day, obviously. That's a little bit hard. So easy ways to incorporate physical activity, walking at lunch. I know it's starting to get nicer out. Well, not today. So it's starting to get nicer out in the summer. Really easy to maybe do like a 10-minute walk, during your lunch break, and then come back and eat your lunch at your desk. Or maybe you want to get some kind of rally together with some of your coworkers or your organization and try to get like a step goal, or do a spreadsheet of people and track their walking. So it doesn't have to be, some days are busier than others, so it doesn't have to be 10 minutes every day, but where can you increase? And then other small ways, if you don't have time to step away, walk to a coworker's desk instead of calling them, or walk to the printer every hour just to get up. Even if you don't need something, make it a plan. I know now, my watch will tell me if I've been sitting too long, so that's a motivation too. Oops, I didn't even realize I was sitting this long. So maybe putting like a reminder in your phone or on your calendar. If you're doing work in the middle of something, you don't realize how long you've been sitting, but then all of a sudden something dings, like a little reminder. You're like, oh gosh, it's been 4 hours and I'm still sitting and working. So making sure that you're getting up and doing things. Other quick ways, take the stairs. So sometimes even that can be a way when it's like cold outside or raining or you can't get outside to walk. Maybe just go up and down the stairs like 2 or 3 times. If you have those at work, that can be something that you can add in. I already talked about standing, and then friendly work competitions, things like that. Finding different ways that work for you to make it accessible to add in physical activity in small ways. So you don't have to go to a physical trainer or the gym or, do specific things to get in physical activity and start to be healthier. It can be easy and attainable. So, just making sure that you're keeping in mind, if you're doing these small things, it has to be consistent for you to see results. So if we're doing, walking 10 minutes every day and that lasts for 3 months, we're probably not going to see the same results as if we were making it a lifestyle change and walking 10 minutes every day for a year. So that has to be part of it too. So sometimes people look at these and they're like, well, that's simple, that's too easy, like I'm not going to see results. You might not see results next week or next month, but if you keep consistent, you will see some change. And then also all these things, I think Candace mentioned it briefly a little bit, it has an impact on sleeping habits. So not only eating late at night can impact some people's digestion, but also choosing the appropriate things can impact how you sleep and how you're affected with maybe indigestion or acid reflux, some of those things. So there's a difference from eating at 9 o'clock at night an apple and peanut butter versus a piece of cake or ice cream. So I hear a lot of, I don't eat after 8 or I don't eat after 6. I heard I need, if your doctor recommends you don't eat, 2 hours before you go to bed, that would be one thing. But if you don't have any kind of limitations like that, then, you can eat before bed, just make an appropriate decision. So, like I mentioned in the grocery shopping, thinking ahead. So if you do like to snack at night, maybe you steer clear of the ice cream and the sweets and the cookies, but you still have your sweet tooth and a craving. Maybe you do some Greek yogurt with cinnamon and honey and slices of apple, or maybe you do frozen yogurt with some berries, or making it a little bit healthful and having those things on hand because you know you're going to get hungry for it. But instead of the higher fat, higher calorie, sweet desserts, you have something a little bit better for yourself. So thinking about that in terms of eating before bed as well. When we have lack of sleep, maybe we're stressed at work, we can't get into a good sleeping habits, things of that nature, it's really important to stick to a routine. I think this is the same thing with being physically active. If we're doing it consistently, it can help us a little bit better than if we're doing it 2 nights a week. So maybe we sit down, we read a few pages of a book, and we go to bed. We take all the blue lights away, or try to the best of our ability, as soon as we can. So maybe it's unrealistic for you to say, I'm going to stop being on my cell phone or the computer an hour before bed. Maybe it starts at 10 minutes, and then we can work our way up and see how our schedule can adjust. So I think that's really important, to be realistic with yourself throughout everything we're saying. So kind of keep that in mind, especially with sleeping habits, because I know this is really hard now that there's more stress, there's more accessibility of employees because we're always on our cell phones, or we're always accessible through email or text or calling. So kind of thinking about what's realistic for you, but making those small changes and trying to increase your changes. Some people do good with like a bedtime tea. Some people say that's not really realistic when they wake up 6 hours in the middle of the night and they gotta get up and go to the bathroom. So also be realistic in that nature too, something that works for you specifically. So kind of just planning that ahead. So I think what I kept saying, realistically, what's important for you, what's your reasoning, what's your motivation behind making these changes or wanting to be more healthy? Maybe you do have a pre-existing condition that you want to cut down on your sodium, or maybe, last time you went to the doctor, your blood sugars were kind of creeping up there. So make it, make something like that, or maybe, you want to be physically active or have more energy to play with kids, grandkids, neighbors, sisters, brothers. That can be your motivation too, but you have to keep that in mind, because if we're doing these things and, like dieting, if we're doing these things for short term, we're going to see short term results. And, as a dietitian with Candace and I, we want to have you set for like a lifetime, a lifestyle change, to make sure you're not only at, maybe a lower BMI, but you're able to do more things, you're able to sleep better, make healthier eating habits a priority. So kind of just keeping that all in mind. And then obviously, realistically, what I said, it has to be consistent for you. So it might not be realistic for you to say, I'm never going to eat out again. I'm never going to go to lunch out. Maybe it's more realistic to set a short-term goal. So I'm going to eat out 1 time a week for the next month and see how that works for me, and see if I can do it and if I can hold myself accountable. And then, 2 weeks in, you go to a restaurant 2 times in 1 week, and you're thinking, oh no, I didn't reach my goal. So reevaluate. What's another realistic goal that you can set for the next month or the next coming weeks? So kind of just honing in and remembering. And then being understanding that sometimes, most of the time, the scale isn't always reflective of a healthy individual. So you can have healthy numbers, healthy blood work, and not be a set BMI. So keeping that in mind too, just making healthful, conscientious decisions about how we can maintain a healthier lifestyle overall. Maybe that doesn't mean losing 100 pounds or 50 pounds. Maybe that just means adding more vegetables into our daily intake, or decreasing the amount of fried foods we consume, things of that nature that are a little bit more, on a smaller scale. And so that kind of goes into the last point of, stop the societal thinking of weight loss and start focusing your mindset on a healthier lifestyle to maintain. And that way, you're also not having a visual goal in mind. You're having, more like characteristics of higher energy, better, physical activity levels. You're sleeping better. Your doctor says, oh my gosh, your numbers look great, you decreased this. So thinking in terms of those instead of like a visual aid of what you want to or think you should look like, or want to, get down to a certain number. So start with the healthier eating habits and then maybe add on. So kind of just keeping it all in and honing it all in on, just a healthful overall impact. So ending on that note, any questions? Yeah.
Can you comment on or talk about the relationship between stress and overeating or stress and portion control? A lot of us are in very stressful careers.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe there's more stress now than there was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's got to be some connection between portion control and stress or overeating.
Yeah, I think a lot of that, and I'll have Candace have, she has other input, but I think a lot of stress and maybe portion control or overeating is bottom line mindless. So, when you're eating at your desk and you're working and at the same time you're eating, you might have finished your whole meal in 5 minutes and you don't even know what you ate. Your body didn't even process what you were consuming. So, so you're stressful working, but also you're mindlessly eating. So then you're over consuming. So you don't realize you were eating, your body's, I got nutrients, but it's not connecting. Your brain's, your hormones aren't regulated because you were eating so fast. And then all of a sudden, an hour later, you reach for a bag of chips or the candy at your neighbor's desk because once again, you didn't really take the time to mindfully choose what you were consuming. So I don't think there's one answer, one cure-all, one explanation of stress and eating in relation to one another. I think it's more, how can I mindfully make decisions while still maintaining, stress just doesn't go away. Overeating just doesn't randomly go away. You have to put yourself in the mindset of making it more of a conscientious decision, stepping away from the computer, maybe not to eat, but maybe not to do a full meal, but maybe to eat like half your meal or your main dish, and then you have snacks. So that can be a realistic change. But I don't know if Candace has a better explanation. Or
no, yeah,
more
I was going to
add-on.
say the mindful eating. And actually, when you're mindlessly eating, you don't really understand when you're actually full. And it actually takes your stomach to send signals up to your brain about 20 minutes until your brain realizes that you're full. So a lot of people will just eat and eat and eat and eat. And then all of a sudden they stop when they're full, but then that just leads to, oh gosh, I'm over full, right? So it's just being more aware of how much you are consuming and what kinds of foods you're consuming. So if you're stressed, you're more likely to go for the junk food or whatever it may be. But that's just going to lower your energy intake too, or your overall energy. So you definitely want to choose those healthier options to increase that energy level.
Yeah. And so I think, there isn't one food or one food group that makes someone less stressful. It's more so what food group or what foods can you choose that are healthier. Because like I said, stress isn't just going to go away. You're not all of a sudden going to be like, oh, I feel like less stressed, so I'm going to make good choices. You're always going to have something, that is weighing down on your mind to either take away from how you're eating or your food choices or how much you're consuming. So, that brings it back to your why. Why do you want to change? Why do you want to make it more of a conscious decision to choose healthier options or step away from your desk for 5 minutes, to try to understand what you're eating, look at your meal instead of a computer and your food, not your food. So that brings it to that. But I think, I think that's overall the bottom line. Any other questions?
I've heard this all my life, but is it so important that you breakfast? If you're not a breakfast person,
I would say yes, just because it's the kickstart to your day. It helps increase that metabolism. It really helps you get that nutrients for your brain to start and for you to actually start moving throughout the day. It helps you kind of, not even for weight loss, but it really helps you kind of burn things off throughout the day in allowing yourself to have that energy consistently work and outside of work too. So I would say yes. I believe Emma would say yes too. It doesn't have to be a full sit-down meal. Whatever I say, I just say apple and peanut butter. Something is better than nothing. So what we try to emphasize, even like a quick protein drink, grab and go. I know a lot of people are just always in their car or just kind of really in the rush. So I would just say making sure that you're getting at least something in. If you don't like breakfast foods, that's fine. Have a string cheese and some nuts. We're going to show you a little trail mix recipe. That could be your breakfast. It's better than nothing. Yeah.
Do you have questions?
Do you have suggestions as to how to handle cravings throughout the day?
Yeah, that's hard. Cravings are hard. I think it's just allowing yourself to have those cravings and allowing yourself to have that food that you are craving, but in moderation. Because if you're wanting ice cream and you're eating everything besides ice cream, you're still going to crave the ice cream until you have it, right? And then that would lead to overeating. So I would say have what you want to have, but really watch that portion control. I mean, there are substitutions and alternatives that you could choose for a healthier option, but in reality, is that going to curb your craving? Sometimes yes, but I mean, when you want a piece of candy, you want a piece of candy. So just allowing yourself to have it, but again, watching that serving size.
Yeah. And if you feel like it's hard to control those sweet cravings, there's some research out there that says eating more protein can help curb your sweet craving if it's like later in the day, like you find yourself at night, oh my gosh, I need like chocolate or some kind of sweet. Sometimes if you look back to what you were eating, maybe it was like all you had was an apple and crackers that day. Well, I mean, obviously you're not going to make good choices because you're hungry. So, thinking in that term too. And then not only that, I think, what Candace was saying, eat that food that you're craving, but in moderation. So looking back, reading the food label, understanding, how much is one serving, and if you're still hungry, then choose a healthy, option to go with it. Or, maybe you eat that and a half an hour later you're wow, I'm craving more. So maybe choose something different from that point on. Just to kind of hone in on, obviously, those sweets are going to be higher calorie, higher fat, higher sugar. So just kind of honing in on serving size and replacing any kind of additional serving you might choose normally with something different. And if it's like a candy or chocolates, making sure that you're taking something out of the bag or out of the package and putting it either on a paper towel or on a plate in a bowl, so you're not mindlessly continuing to eat. Remove yourself from the room, take that with you, and enjoy your food, enjoy it. So that way you're not mindlessly continuing.
Is one bag of pretzels a serving size?
So, yeah, no. The individual packs could be.
The big ones, yes.
So, let's say you have a regular workout routine, and maybe you work out every other day. Do you modify what you eat on the days that you work out, or do you try to just keep the same, basic things overall? I know that there's a lot of meal planning in the, gym, what I call gym rat community, right? So, you see people planning their meals all week, and they have all their chicken and all their broccoli and all that. And so, is that something that you would recommend? Do you alter what you plan for your workouts or after workout versus pre-workout, those kinds of issues?
Go ahead. So I wouldn't necessarily say it has to be a different caloric intake every day, different from what you eat. Now, if you're doing a certain amount of physical activity, you might need more energy. So you might have like a pre-workout snack. So that snack should be a little bit higher in protein, a moderate amount of carbohydrate, and then, obviously going to work out. So if you don't like eating before you work out, maybe it's like half of a granola bar or a handful of nuts, something to get you through the workout. Now, if it's more anaerobic and less like running, or you're expelling a bunch of energy and it's more like muscle building or something of that nature, like strength training, I would recommend keeping that kind of the same, but maybe a little bit less on the protein, or less on the carbohydrate, more on the protein. So I wouldn't say that it has to be a different calorie range every time, but I would recommend making sure that you're fueling your body appropriately to get yourself through the workout, and obviously give your body what it needs. If you're strength training and you don't have any protein, you're probably not going to see a muscle mass increase because you're not really providing your body with the opportunity for that. So kind of keeping that in mind.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Basically, when you do work out, you you need more calories because you're expending so much or you're burning them off quicker, but it doesn't have to be like a
You don't
whole
want to
bunch, right?
over-consume, obviously, because you want the deficit. That's where you see the weight loss. So, just kind of fueling it appropriately.
Good questions.
Yeah. Anything?
Yeah. We didn't, so that's going to vary on every individual. Every single person's different. When we do calorie ranges, it's based off your age, your height, your weight, your gender, your activity level. It's a whole big calculation that really gives you that range. So, I mean, anywhere, I don't think I would say anywhere lower than 1,200, and then it goes up from there.
Can you recommend any apps that you find, or apps do you find that are the most beneficial?
Yeah, so I think logging your food is really great. I think one thing that a lot of people get turned off by that is that it takes time and it really takes consistency, but I see a lot of my patients personally who do log, they see a lot more success than patients who don't. But MyFitnessPal is a great one. It's a free app, and you can log you can log your exercise, you can log your water intake, and you can log all of your food options. And then also it has like a scanner button that you can, take a thing right here and say, oh, this is what I had. Boom, it's super easy. I think that's the most popular one.
Yeah, I've also used it's called LifeSum, and that kind of is a similar concept, LIFESUM. But there are a bunch, top listed. Also, I tell patients to take a picture of your food or write it down on like a Post-it or something, so that way either you can remember to log it appropriately, or just so you're making yourself more aware of what you're actually eating. So if I'm about to eat a bowl of ice cream and I take a picture and look at it the next day, I might be like, oh no, I can't believe I ate all that. Or I go to a restaurant and I meant to, ask for a box to go, but I ended up eating the whole thing, and I kind of recall that moment. I'm like, oh no, I think I wasn't supposed to eat that much because I'm trying to watch my sodium, or whatever might be your reasoning. So that can be, something to look into too. But the apps give you more of a caloric range and a better idea of nutrient breakdown.
Yeah, and typically you can personalize it. So it'll ask you height, age, weight, whatever, and then it will come up with a calculation. And you can sometimes finagle it yourself with the carbs and proteins and things like that, but it would typically do like a standard.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, we're going to show you like a quick little demo. Emma's going to kind of talk you
help
through
me.
like a quick, easy trail mix. With trail mix, you can literally put anything in there, right? I think one thing with trail mix is just the serving size, like what we've been talking about, that portion control. We have the recipe up here of what we're using. And it kind of differs from the store-bought trail mixes just because it's going to be lower in sodium. And then you can actually do it for your taste preference. So I think both of these, so I know Emma was gonna just kind of get everything ready, but the first thing that she's gonna put a cup in for everything. But the nuts, these are almonds and it's just raw. So they're not salted, so they're natural. Those are peanuts, those are also unsalted. We did add a little bit of the low salt cashews just to kind of give that taste. And then, sorry.
Yeah, and then, I didn't print out like a comparison or anything, but I did look at a nutrient label of a store-bought trail mix, one that you just buy at the grocery store. Added sugars I can't pronounce. If you're making it yourself, you're looking at all the ingredients, so that way you kind of have a better idea and understanding of, I'm not putting extra sugar in here, or, I was supposed to put this in here. I'm not putting extra sugar in here, or maybe I'll use like a low calorie sweetener, or like a natural sugar if it's like a little bit too bland, something like that. Or maybe if you're like me, I'll just add more chocolate chips. So that way you kind of have a better understanding. And then for anyone who has any kind of nut allergy or gluten allergy, we did. Unfortunately, that would have taken a lot longer. So, or a recipe that you can't put together in front of everyone. So we purchased some granola bars that are, they just have a very few ingredient list, and obviously it's certified gluten-free. So.
And what Emma was putting in there, these are just craisins, and she actually got the 50% less sugar. So just those mindful things that you can continue to add.
For
Oh, yeah.
price comparison, it's a little bit more expensive to buy all the separate ingredients, obviously. But I mean, this could last you, I mean, I'm not even done adding things. So this could last you easily a week plus. If you're following the portion size. So on that note too, any kind of granola is about a fourth a cup, you know, a guesstimate. So I would say these little cups, probably about like halfway, would be about a fourth a cup, maybe give or take. So just kind of keeping that in mind. I keep going for that big cup.
And then she added some pumpkin seeds and then some dark chocolate chips.
So I don't have a spoon, but we're just going to mix all this together.
Any other questions?
What do you know about whether flax seeds are better ground up or not ground up? When you mentioned pumpkin seeds,
I don't.
you reminded me of discussion up here.
I don't think there's a nutrient breakdown powder versus the seed because they're already so fine. I mean, I can tell you what nutrient value a flax seed has compared to like a pumpkin seed, but I don't think that there's like a difference between the powder version. I don't think it eliminates nutrients if you emulsify it.
Which one's better, pumpkin seeds or flax seeds?
Well, they just have different. So the flax seed's going to be like a higher fiber content, and the pumpkin seeds are obviously going to be higher in like some of your vitamins and minerals and not have that fiber content. So kind of just, and it does have fiber, but not as high of the fiber content as the flax seed. So if you're thinking in like what you need, there's just a difference there. Okay, so we're gonna just dip these cups in and we're pretty much done unless you guys have other questions.
Does everybody want to try? Okay, I'll come around. Anybody have an allergy or anybody want to try one of these? Sure. All right, let's do it. Yeah, come on up, come on up.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Ah,
Those are the,
thanks.
yeah.
And there's recipe cards, but like we said, you can kind of throw whatever, really.
Yeah, those are the recipes that we use.
I was kind of generous, so.
Right. Thank you guys for coming out.